Well, hello and welcome to the RTÉ Sport Podcast, where for the next 3 episodes, it's going to be all about the World Athletics Championships that are running from the 13th to the 21st of September. And you can watch it all right here on RTÉ, as well as keeping up with the latest news from the championships on the website, app and social. You can now tune in to the lovely Athletics Podcast mini-series, where we're going to be discussing the stories behind the headlines and coverage. It all kicked off in Tokyo today, and I'm delighted to be joined by world indoor champion Derval O'Rourke and 2-time European indoor champion David Gillick. Derval, it's back to the scene of the Tokyo Olympics in 2021. What do you think it's going to mean to those athletes that are making a return to the stadium?
I think it will mean a huge amount to them, because it had to have been a really difficult Olympics there in Tokyo. In the middle of COVID times, no family, no friends there. And I think Tokyo and the athletes actually deserve a party in Tokyo. They deserve to go there, have full stadiums, have that atmosphere, and just experience the way that they should have. So for me, it's brilliant that it's back, and it almost bookends kind of this 5-year cycle where 5 years ago it started in Tokyo, and now it kind of ends in Tokyo. And yeah, it's brilliant. Great to see everybody back there.
And David, you're out in Tokyo for us at the moment. What do you think? What do you think is different about the experience? And can you tell us a little bit about the conditions that the athletes are experiencing in terms of weather?
Yeah, just to kind of touch on Derv's point there. Like I think I was here for the Olympics in 2021, and there was kind of an air of disappointment that none of the locals, the Japanese, couldn't come and celebrate the fact that the Olympics were being held here in Tokyo. And it's nice to come back and just see a full stadium and the enthusiasm. And like, the ticket sales have gone really, really well. We're told all the evening sessions are going to be a sellout. So that's like 60,000 people in the stadium. And I think they're all out in force to celebrate the fact that the World Athletics have come back so soon after the Olympic Games. And I think that's kind of what World Athletics did. It was very much like, let's bring it back to Tokyo and celebrate the fact that we can now have full stadiums. It's interesting because when we were here for the Olympics, there was more sun. Okay, so it was very, very hot. Don't get me wrong, but there was more sun. This time around, it's a little bit cloudier. There's a few thunder showers and electrical storms, but the humidity is off the scale. It is absolutely roasting. Like, it is now 25 past 11, and if I keep moving, I'm going to start sweating. Okay, and we don't want that, right? So all the athletes have to deal with that, and this is something from their whole kind of plan for the whole season. Even going back to the institute in Blanchardstown, they have the heat chamber. A lot of our endurance athletes have been using that. They're in Hong Kong, so they've built that into their training, because it is definitely something that you have to be aware of here. And even for like the sprinters as well. And I know, Derv, we've both competed in really warm climates over our careers, and you have that, okay, what am I going to do in the call room? Who's there to give me like the ice towel, the drinks, stuff like that, even in terms of the sprint events, because that is another thing that all the athletes have to kind of factor in, because it is very, very hot here.
Derval, can you contextualise for us what it is like competing in temperatures like that?
I think you just have to factor it in through every part. So it was interesting today. I saw in the men's 100 there was it was deemed a faulty start, but it looked like a false start, and they were kept down there on the start line for quite a long time, and you could see all of them sweating. Like, they weren't moving around, but like they were visibly sweating. And I was thinking, God, they're going to have to really kind of recover now after to get those electrolytes in. But for sprinters, you have your warm-up routine. It depends on who you are, but most people, it's like 60 to 90 minutes. Like, it's a long warm-up. And when it's in those kind of conditions, you have to factor in longer recoveries. There has to be more time between all your drills and everything you do, because you just don't want to get too hot. You don't want to sweat too much. You don't want to lose too much before you go into the stadium. And as well, when it's a major championship, it's not a once-off race. So you've got 3 rounds, a heat, a semi and a final, and it's just managing yourself through that. And it's funny, interesting, Gillick saying, like, we would have experienced this, and we competed all over the world. I actually always found traveling outside of Europe trickier. I found humidity I didn't really enjoy, and time zones, all that kind of stuff. So I think the people who do well at these championships are the ones who are very good at coping with that kind of thing. And I think even, on the first day of the athletics, you could see with the women's 10K, no one was really pushing the pace hard for a lot of it, because I think those conditions were challenging. But again, athletics is a global sport. It's going to be everywhere in the world. So you need to be good at adjusting. You need to be good at dealing with whatever is thrown at you from whatever venue you're in, whether you're in Rio for an Olympics, Tokyo for a World Championships. Like, it just is what it is.
We're going to take a little look back and review the mixed relay performance and maybe one other performance from the session today. But the mixed relay, 6 in their heat, 3:13.59, missing out by 3 places in the end for those 2 non-automatic spots. You know, do you think the conditions played a factor there today, Derval? Sharlene Mawdsley coming off the track saying she felt like she was going to pass out. We've seen Sharlene in many different races gutting it to the line, and I don't think I've ever seen her on hands and knees quite like that before.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I'm trying to just think to their interviews and who said what. I don't know. I think the relay was always going to be a challenge this year, regardless of conditions, because I think you have a situation where you've got Jack Raftery coming in having run sub 45, so he's bringing a lot to the table. You have Conor Kelly, who's that under-20 European champ, and then you have Sophie Becker and Sharlene Mawdsley. Sophie struggled this season through injuries. She's been a bit off her best, and Sharlene has had a really tough year. Her dad passed away in June. She hasn't raced a huge amount, and it's interesting. Sometimes, you know, at the end of a race, when the result doesn't go well, everything feels bad. And I've no doubt that it's challenging. I've no doubt it's warm out there. But I just think they're not where they want to be or where they could be. And that's making everything feel worse and making everything feel a lot harder. You know, they did that holding camp in Hong Kong. And, you know, as Dave said, like, you know, they do have the Institute of Sports. They would have looked at all of this. It'll be interesting to see how Sharlene recovers from that for the individual four. You know, if she's coming off feeling like that, you want her to go out individually and actually put on a really good show, just for herself, because I think she came into this outdoor season in phenomenal shape. I really, really do. And I'd love for her sake if she could salvage a good performance out here at Worlds.
So, David, I just wanted to run by a quote from Jack Raftery that he said in his interview with Athletics Ireland. So we would have spoken to you and then gone on and did some media with them. And he said, "We expect to be up with the big teams, those with more funding and a larger pool, because we think that of ourselves." Do you think the relays are underfunded? Is that the issue here? Or is it simply that without Rhasidat, it's difficult for them to compete? Or is it simply the pool of athletes in Ireland is just not big enough? What do you think was maybe the missing factor there today, David?
No, I think maybe Jack's comments was maybe alluding to like the big nations, the bigger pool of talent. And I think the relay, particularly the mixed relay, has shown, you know, since that event, the event's inception a few years ago, we've finaled at all the major championships, Worlds and Olympics. So I think it's clear that the mixed relay has a place amongst the top 8 in the world. And when you look at, you know, the top 8 in terms of sprints nations, you know, America, you know, the Caribbean countries, stuff like that. So I'd say he was alluding more to that. Like our funding system for the relay is actually quite good in terms of what they're actually getting, because they have reached those levels. And it's a squad as well. There's a number of athletes included into that. So I'd say, look, you know, the reality is you have athletes coming off the track. They came here with probably the goal of making a final and kicking off that first day for Team Ireland with a global final. It didn't happen. And relays are tricky because you need everyone like humming along at the same time for it all to click into place. And we've been so fortunate over the last couple of years that has actually happened. You know, you mentioned Rhasidat. Rhasidat never, you know, generally runs the major or the mixed relay at a major championship because she's focusing on the individual. So I think when you look at today and you look at the splits from all the teams, you know, there was a lot more 44s, there was a lot of 49s in there in the heat. So that kind of shows you that maybe other nations with the bigger pool are actually going, you know what, this is a massive opportunity to get a medal. We want a medal, we're going to perform, we're going to put in some strong athletes into this team and make sure that we're in the final and make sure that we're in the hunt for a medal. So, you know, I think with the Irish quartet, yeah, like a few of the athletes have had up and down years with injuries and things like that. So again, we just weren't all on the same page at this moment in time. And that's just the way relays go. So, you know, I wouldn't hold it against any of the athletes. They're all out there trying to do their best. It wasn't to be today.
Yeah, and Derval, how do you think they're going to pick themselves up for the next relay opportunity, which is going to be on Saturday? What do you think they're going to have to do to try and make that final?
I think that's going to be a really big ask to make the final. I would have thought that they had a better chance in the mixed relay. So for me, Sophie and Sharlene are both running individually. So I think they need to take care of that. It needs to be one day at a time. recover from the relay, go back, get ready for the first round of the 400, and then start to look at that second women's relay. To me, this year has felt like, kind of with the relay, it's almost like the start of a new cycle. You know, like we have this, you have this 4-year Olympic cycle, and it feels like some of the people who were really well known for the relays are starting to maybe be phased out because they're retiring or they're thinking about retiring, and then new blood is coming in. So with that women's relay, you just want to see good splits. You want them to go out, perform where they have been individually on the season, ideally a little bit better, and be happy with that. And then you just start to build into next year, because Europeans will be massive next year because it's in Birmingham. It's massive anyway for us because we can medal on that stage. But I think we can't get too carried away with trying to get into a final here in the women's relay. I think that's going to be incredibly hard. And also because Sophie and Sharlene have those individual 4s first, they just need to get through those.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely the focus for them next. Moving on to have a little chat about the women's 1500 metre heats. I think it's safe to say, Derval, there was maybe a surprise there. Sophie O'Sullivan qualifying in one of the automatic spots, the final one in her heat 4:02.12. Can you describe to us what Sonia's reaction was like? Because we didn't have a camera on that. I would love to know.
Yeah, it's actually a real shame we didn't have a camera on it, because I think she was just so incredibly proud of her, which she's always proud of her, but this was a much harder championship for Sophie than the Olympics last year. She's been injured for weeks. She's been cross-training. And I guess there was a lot of mumbling around whether or not she should be there. And Sonia's so involved in the sport. Of course, she's hearing that. I've had chats with her going, do you think this is a good idea? You're so exposed on a global stage. And I think, Sonia was very emotional actually in studio, because I think she was just so proud and so relieved for her. That's her baby. And, we all see Sonia in a certain way, and that she's tough and she's got, incredibly high standards, but that's her little girl. And I always say to her, what's your involvement here? And she'll always say, only as the mum. Like, she's just not involved in the training. She's not involved in the management. So she's just involved as her mum, but it just happens to be that your mum's an Olympic medalist and a legend in the sport. So incredibly proud, and it's a pity we didn't come straight back to the studio, because I'd say people might have seen a slightly different side, but a very lovely one.
And of course, Sarah Healy qualifying 4:02.67, third place in Heat 4. So we're going to have 2 Irish women in those semi-finals. But I suppose I just wanted to quickly talk about a story that has been the undertone to the women's 1500 in Tokyo, which is that Ethiopian runner Weltelji has been barred from the Worlds over a legal dispute due to an alleged missed drugs test. And David, I just wanted to know, has there been much chat in Tokyo about this? And I always wonder, are announcements and the timing of such violations like this bad for the sport when it's so close to the championships?
Yeah, look, it's going to make headlines. And I think Arian Knighton was another one, the sprinter, who made headlines as well. But in the Ethiopian case, the reason that came out right before the championship was because she was still hoping to compete in the championships, and the Ethiopian governing body basically cleared her to do so. It was the AIU that actually said, hang on a second, we're going to look into this a little bit deeper and go, this they smell a rat, basically, to be blunt about it. And they just said, no, this isn't happening. And that's why it's gone to cast, and that's why it's been upheld as the investigation continues, which makes complete sense. There's obviously an issue there. There's obviously something that has happened, and you can't just brush it on the carpet, by the Ethiopian anti-doping body, because they're a vested interest in this. So it has to go to an intermediate. It has to go to someone outside of that circle and go, hang on, let's look into this a little bit further. And while that investigation is going on, you can't have an athlete out here competing because, they could have failed a drug test. They refused to take that test. So we have to ask the question as to why. So I think it's the right thing. Yes, it's a negative headline, but these are actually positive headlines in the long run, because we need to start, delving into these cases and trying to clean up the sport. And if it's a negative in the short term, I think it's a positive in the long term.
And of course, Derval, the other context to this is that Weltelji is actually a medalist from the last World Championships, where Ciara Mageean finished 4th. And of course, even if this violation is upheld and she maybe receives a ban, her results will not be backdated. But I'm sure that could be a little bit of a blow, and it could feel you know, even when that race happened and Ciara did finish fourth, there is always the thought of like, oh, you never know. Someone could get banned. You could get, you know, there's been medal reallocations in the past. It's been happening quite frequently. But do you think countries with high numbers of doping violations and bans should be banned completely? I know we've seen quite a lot this year from Kenya. Russia obviously has had issues and continue to do so. They're still not allowed to compete in the sport. But do you think that that is a solution, that specific countries are banned? Maybe coaches. Gabby Thomas previously has come out this summer saying, you know, if coaches are associated, they should be banned completely. What's your thoughts on that?
First of all, as soon as I saw the Welteji story, I thought of Ciara McGeehan, because it's so hard to make an impact on the global stage at a World Outdoor Championships, and to come fourth is it's pretty exceptional, particularly in an event like the women's 1500. It's so, all the events are competitive, but the women's 1500 is unbelievably competitive, and so I think that's a performance I'd say Ciara is probably incredibly proud of. And then you think, okay, well, if this person's been suspended, you know, there's obviously something suspicious going on there, or the powers that be believe there's something suspicious. And then you go, okay, well, when did that suspicious behaviour start? Like, so I actually listened to a great podcast recently with Malcolm Gladwell and Ross Tucker on Science of Sport. And they actually talked about if someone gets banned, that you wipe all their previous performances and you reallocate medals. So because they often don't go back. And that would have been something that would have happened to me with a couple of my forts, where there were scenarios came afterwards, but they never went back. And, you know, I would have had a situation with the Europeans as well, where I was second and the girl who won it got, I think, 2 doping bans afterwards, but they never went back. So I think there's definitely an area to look at in terms of like, how, in what situations do we go back in and just like, is it almost as simple as if you ever serve a ban for any violation, all your efforts get what you can come back to the sport, because, you know, we know life bans don't work. You can come back to the sport, but you start from scratch. You have no previous record. You don't get introduced as the champion or the medalist from wherever. You lose all of those results. So I find that kind of idea quite interesting, and one I'd be into. In terms of countries, I think it's almost too simplistic to say ban countries or do that. But I do find this concept of like athletes test positive or they have a doping violation and the athlete gets the punishment. But I think agents and coaches have to be considered in the whole area. And they have been in recent years. Like there have been agents and coaches that have been given bans removed from the sport. And I'm very pro looking into the structure around people. And often, like, you know, situations leave clues. Like if there's many people in a training group that are coming back with positive tests or doping violations, I think you have to look at that. But I do think the sport has, and I just would like them to do it maybe even a little bit more. And yeah, Gabby Thomas did make some comments, but also the other side of that is I find, you know, we had a situation last year at the Olympics where Rhasidat was fourth. Nazir, who got on the podium, had a ban for a doping violation. I think it was missed tests. Yep. And Nazir is a strong favourite here, but sometimes the problem is that everyone starts shouting when their country is affected. So when you're the person who's come fourth, or you're the person that's dropping from gold to silver, if that's the point that you're shouting, you lose a little bit in that argument, because if you're only shouting when it impacts you specifically, either as a nation or as an individual, I think you lose the room a little bit. So I think it's just that ongoing discussion. It's that ongoing struggle in that, and where you advocate and where you try and push for change. I think that should be happening all the time. But I do know, I think there's a pretty strong athletes commission now for World Athletics, and I think that's something that they're looking at a lot. And I think there are changes happening. So in athletics, we often beat ourselves with a stick, you know, with the sport, with drug tests and positives. And you know, you're saying, is it a bad story on the eve of the championships? It's not a great story, but it's brilliant. Like, a straight away, I said to Sonia and Rob, like, well, that's someone else gone for Sarah Healy potentially for a final, you know. And if they're doing the wrong thing, then they should be gone. So I think it's good that we're relatively transparent compared to other sports.
Well, I think we're probably going to have to let David go. It is getting so late out there in Tokyo. He's ready for his bed and marathon early tomorrow morning for him. So thank you so much for joining us, Dave, and best of luck out there tomorrow.
Bye, cheers, Gilly. Guys. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to look ahead to a couple of items from the rest of the championships now. We're actually going to have a little clip from Sharlene Mawdsley to start us off. Sharlene was quoted saying that she backs Rhasidat's call to miss the championships, and we're going to hear from her now.
It's always different when we don't have Rhasidat. She's such a vital part of the team, and of course, we have won the European gold mixed relay with her. We came second at the European Championships last year and 4th place in the Olympics. Of course, we're going to miss her there, but she has to look out for herself, and I think that's the most important thing. Sport can be so hard, and when you're at the top, it's really difficult, so she has to put herself first.
So yeah, that was Sharlene speaking when she was still back in Ireland. I think just as the news had broken that Rhasidat was not going to be here. I know we have hashed this out before, Derval will not completely rehash it again. But what do you make of that? Do you think that it's good that Rhasidat is getting support from her teammates on this matter?
Yeah, I don't know, does it matter? And I don't mean that in a flippant way, but it's such an individual sport in so many ways, even though they obviously run this relay together, but they're not training partners, they're not outside of when they're at championships, they're not probably spending a huge amount of time together. So I think it's really nice that Sharlene's being so positive, because I think, she's not, you don't want to be creating more headlines unnecessarily, because it's funny the way media is as well. Like, I think things can become very soundbitey, and people love to have a headline, love to be able to click on, love to have a headline that lots of people will click on. That's how that world works. So I think from that perspective, I think it's really good that her teammates are backing her, because it's not pouring pressure on her. But I think there's an overall picture here whereby that transition from being a supreme college athlete, being on that treadmill of, NCAAs, Europeans, Worlds, Europeans, Olympics, and having to figure out your system, your structure that makes you a world-class athlete that can be in shape, perform year in, year out, ideally not break down too much injury-wise. If you do break down injury-wise, have a good system and structure in place to deal with that. That's really hard to do. That high-performance structure is very individual. It's not the same for everybody, and it also isn't the same every year. So you could have one year where you have a system and structure in place that's very much for you, what works for you, and you could go into the next year and for some reason you might not be gelling with your coach as well. You might not be gelling with your sports psych as well. S&C mightn't be working. So as much as it's as simple as like running around in a circle, I think athletics, there's a lot of layers to it. And if you think of other sports, like take rugby, if there's a rugby player gets a contract with one of the provinces or he's centrally contracted, he doesn't have to figure out like who's the best coach for him, he doesn't have to figure out any piece of the puzzle. So in athletics, that's both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because the power is in your hands. You have lots of independence. You can basically go your own way. And I loved that. And I think most really good athletes really love that. But the curse side of it is when you're young and you're trying to figure it, it's a very, very steep learning curve. So I think that transition to being a professional, it being Rhasidat's job, taking care of her body and mind, she's navigating that, and she needs a bit of space while she's navigating that. And hopefully she's getting that space, and she comes back stronger. Like for me, I hope this year becomes a real important year for setting up her future, and that she steps back and looks at everything, because there's so many different aspects and it's just not easy.
No, I mean, it's so complicated, the system behind these athletes, and especially managing the media commitments, the demands on you. And someone who does have a lot of demands on them is Sharlene Mawdsley. Like, I feel like every other week I see her with a new brand deal, something else going on. And I'm just always so impressed with how she handles herself. Like, Sharlene seems to have a really good grasp on that. And we have another clip from her about how she is planning to run all 3 events. So we'll play that in now.
Okay.
Preparations are going good. I haven't raced in a little bit, over 400 metres, but I've been getting the work in behind the scenes. So yeah, that's the most important part. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Tokyo and looking forward for the season to be over as well, to take a break. Yeah, I'm going to do them all. I'll be running the mixed relay, the individual 4, and then the women's relay at the end of the championship. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to every event. I think I really do love the relays. They kind of set me up, having the mixed relay before my individual. I obviously haven't raced a 4 in quite some time, so getting to do that will be really important before my individual debut.
I'm going to tell you one of the things that really stands out to me in that, I can't wait for a break. And I feel like this championship's being so late for, my God, everything Sharlene has been through this year, the injury at the start of the year, losing her dad, all of those things. Like, this is someone who has a really big week ahead of them How do you think she's going to be feeling right now, especially off the back of maybe a bit of disappointment in the mixed?
Yeah, I wonder is she mentally a bit fatigued, because she's dealt with a lot this year. And the other factor in it, because we're talking about athletes and systems and structures and setting up your own high performance structure. She's changed the training structure this year. So she's gone to Tony Lester, who is in the UK, new training partners, new coach. I know she's still based in Ireland, but she travels a lot. She goes in all their training camps, and even that, like, that's a big change coming into a new Olympic cycle. And I just, again, because you look at the humans behind the performances, and Sharlene's a great person. I think she's done phenomenal stuff for the sport. She's so popular. The kids absolutely love her. They think she is the bee's knees. And what she does on that final relay leg is really impactful. But again, I always go back to Sharlene. Like, I think she's kind of owes herself a really big individual performance. Whether or not it'll come here, I'm not sure, because it's been a hard year. But I think going forward, you'd love to see her get that low 50 pointer, hit 49 in a final, and just see where that takes her. So yeah, just another week to kind of live in the moment, stay present, get through each day, do her best, and then a well-deserved break, I think, will do her the world of good.
Oh, absolutely. So just to confirm, Sharlene Mawdsley is going to be going in Heat 3, Lane 9 tomorrow, and Sophie Becker, Heat 6, Lane 2. So not the best lane draw for the two Irish athletes, but I'm sure they'll just have to make do what they can. And we're going to move on and talk about your favourite event, the women's 100 metre hurdles.
Great. Katie, I thought we were only talking about women's 100 metre hurdles. I mean, you brought me on here and I thought it was a hurdles podcast. Go on.
Well, we didn't really land any distance events on you today. So I feel like,
I'm happy.
You're happy.
Speed.
You should be happy enough. Speed talks. Probably one of the strongest events in the world at the moment. A really exciting prospect coming up. Sarah Lavin is involved. My main question is, do you think the world record is going to go? Because there is a $100,000 bonus if they do it. And I'm like, if you were one of those athletes that's kind of on the edge of that, I feel like if you wanted to make some big money, that's the time to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a tasty check to take home, isn't it? $100,000. Okay, so the women's 100 hurdles has been in completely new territory for probably the last 3 to 4 years, culminating in now where I reckon there's 8 women who I could have a case for winning, where I could sit here and convince you blind why each one of these 8 are going to win. And I could do that 8 times over. Whereas normally you're like, oh, this person is edging it slightly. To be fair, Masai Russell, the American who broke the American record, is the fastest in the field, 12:17, probably is edging it slightly. But you're also in an event where you have 10 barriers and people make mistakes under pressure. And the other side of how fast the women are running now is when they're clipping hurdles at that pace, it can be really catastrophic in a race. So do I think the world record's going to go? I kind of think there's a really high chance, probably the highest chance of any event at this championship. But it's such a funny thing to say because, when I was racing, the world record wasn't even a consideration in that era because nobody was near it. So it's mad that it got broken in the past few years, and then we're thinking about it being broken again. And I saw where Masai Russell was asked, did she think breaking 12 seconds was possible? And she said, yeah, she did. What? Not even necessarily for her, because the world record is a 12-12.
Toby Amisan, who has been cleared of wrongdoing for whereabouts, but is one of those athletes that has had a little bit of a question mark over her name, but of course cleared of that wrongdoing. Yeah,
and Toby Amisan as well. Outside of that, which isn't great, she relocated to Jamaica. So she's been coached now by Glenn Mills, which is Usain Bolt's coach, which is a really big move because, he has coached hurdlers before, but it wouldn't be the person I would automatically think of. In Jamaica, you've those 2 really strong camps. You've got Glenn Mills, which is Usain Bolt's coach, and then the other camp is MVP Track Club, which is Stephen Francis, who coaches Safa Powell, but would have coached Bridget Foster Hilton, who was world champion a number of years ago. So it's interesting that she made that move to Jamaica. Yes, I'm just trying to think, like, there's just so many strong women in it. Like, where do you start and where do you stop? It's just, there's you've got 2 who've run 12-1, and then you've a load of women. Like, you've a handful of women in a 12-2. But here's my little hot take. I think,
hot take.
Yeah, my hot take is I think Nadine Visser can get on the podium. And to consider that 10 years ago, she had her first World Championships and it was in heptathlon. She was a multi-eventer. She's Dutch. She has run 12:28, which is incredible. But actually, the day she ran 12:28, she ran it in a heat and a beat. And in the final, she hit a few hurdles and she was racing Masai. And I think she hit the hurdles because she was going so fast. And I think she just lost control of that speed. So if she can so hurdles is about controlled aggression, controlling the aggression, controlling the speed. You have to be aggressive. You have to be fast. But if it spirals out of control, you're going to hit the hurdles and you're either going to fall or your race is going to be gone. So I can't wait. I think it's going to be fireworks. And the other thing about that group of women and that group of hurdlers, and it is the same at any stage in a World Championships, none of them are afraid. Like they stand on the start line and I don't know, is it how they're mentally wired that they have no respect for the fact that they could absolutely wrap themselves around a hurdle and end up on their head on the ground. They don't care about that. They just fearless. Like it's the utter lack of fear that I love. I love the chaos of it.
Do you think that if the fear comes in, for example, for Masai Russell, that could spell end game for her chance of winning the title?
I think anybody, whether it's Masai or whether it's, you've got Danielle Williams, double world champion in there as well, Akira Nugent, who's also Jamaican. If you have a moment of doubt, and that moment of doubt could be like on the start line before the start says on your marks, it could be in set, or it could be just a moment of doubt where you don't push into a hurdle as hard as you need to. You're done. Like you can't. It's not an event where there is no leeway to get anything wrong. I don't believe in that event, particularly currently, because there's so little between them. Nobody's dominant. So yeah, I don't believe any of them are afraid. And I also think they all believe that they should be the world champion, which just makes for quite a fascinating 12 seconds, perhaps 11.9 seconds.
You never know. If we do see that, we need to have a camera on you in the studio.
Yeah.
I don't know what would your reaction be if they did that? Disbelief?
I just think it's so impressive, because I used to run that event, and when you're running really fast, it feels like someone has tipped the track slightly downhill, and they've tipped it slightly downhill and they've pulled the hurdles closer together. Like you feel slightly out of control, but it's about being able to manage that and not panic. So when they go that fast, like I just love how exciting it is. I think it's amazing and I think it's so technical. They're all such brilliant sprinters as well. Most of them, like Akira Nugent has run 11:0. She could make a case for being one of the best Jamaican sprinters this year in the 100. So yeah, I love it. I just think it's, and I also think it's like quite cool and glamorous. Myself and Rob talk about this a lot. We think the women's and the men's hurdles, but we think hurdles like are so cool. And in his running club, all the kids always want to hurdle. My kids want to hurdle, like every kid just wants to hurdle. My kids don't want to run any miles or do anything that's too hard, but they want to jump a hurdle.
I never wanted to jump a hurdle.
Oh my
goodness. Is there something wrong with me?
Yeah, you wanted to run miles. Like, were you just not cool? I don't know.
No, one of my friends, she broke her arm doing hurdles. So I was like, no, not doing that, too scared. So Sarah Lavin is going to be going in Heat 1. She's lane 8. She's got Masai Russell. Oh. Qualification is first 3 plus 6 fastest. So it is generous enough in terms of that. You know, Sarah's had some really consistent championship performances, but I think that this year, and I think she said it herself in interviews, I think it was maybe after, Europeans last year, she was like, how can they're running, 12:2, 12:3, how can she compete with that? Season's best 12:76, personal best 12:62. How do you think the championships are going to go for her?
First of all, because she's so experienced, I think being in Masai Russell's heat isn't really a problem because I think she's used to that. Like that can be a problem if someone is younger and they're inexperienced, because when you come out of the blocks against someone who's running that kind of pace, it is so shocking because they could have like half a meter or a meter on you at hurdle 1, which is like would absolutely blow your mind. So for Sarah, that won't happen because no one's going to surprise her. The pace isn't going to surprise her. I think she'll be trying to hang on for dear life with Masai in it. Now, the other thing I will say about Masai or any of the kind of top 8, top 10, I think, by the way, I think there's about 16 women who could make the final. It's navigating the rounds and not hitting a hurdle. And Sarah knows that as well. So I think you also hear hurdlers saying like clean races, like they don't want to be clipping hurdles. So Masai at the moment is going so fast that she has to be really careful all she needs to do is get into the final. She doesn't need to blitz the heat. She doesn't need to blitz the semi. But also because of the reality around hurdles, it's the same amount of steps to the first, same amount of steps in between. They're all the same markers, so you can't go that much slower. You can't really take your foot off the gas too much because it's actually almost more dangerous. You make a technical mistake. So I think for Sarah, it's about going in. She knows she's got that 12.7 season's best. Don't compare it to what they're doing at the top end, because I think it becomes too much of a mammoth task if you compare it. I think if you actually start thinking about that too much, it's too much for you. You just have to stay in your own lane, try and get something from it yourself, and just run a good race. Because the other side of it is, and it's something I used to do a lot in championships, there's a reason championships are on. Like, if they gave out the semi-final positions, the final positions and the medals on stats, nobody would be here. So no one's guaranteed anything, and when you've 10 barriers, you have to be the one that makes no mistake, and you have to capitalise if other people make mistakes.
Absolutely. She will go in the heats of those women's 100-meter hurdles, which are going to be overnight. I think it's about 3 a.m. or something. It's the time scale we're looking for that. So are you going to be staying up to watch?
I doubt it. You know, we are staying together, myself, Rob and Sonia, during this coverage, which we always do. We sort of move in together, and Sonia is the one that watches things in the middle of the night. She goes to bed and she tells us she's not going to. And then the next morning when we wake up, she's like, you'll never guess what happened. And she's gotten up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to watch it. And she's the first person to give us a reaction. So I'm a bit sleepier than her. I'll probably be asleep and catch it on the player in the morning, but I'll get the how it looked live from Sonia.
Well, there's going to be so many more Irish in action. Kate O'Connor in the women's heptathlon, Mark English and Kate McPhillips in the men's 800, and Nicola Tuttle in the women's hammer, just to name a few over the next few days. I think we're going to leave it there for today. Thank you for listening, and make sure you all tune into the athletics action on RT2 and the RT Player from now until the 21st of September for all of that action from Tokyo. We're going to be back next week with 2 more episodes to review all of the Irish performances and international from the Japanese capital. So until then, goodbye.
Thank you.